is Dr. Tabitha Kinlan, and I am a scholar of early modern literature. I worked as an assistant professor of English at a university in Dubai, and I'm currently doing a career change in studying international relations with a focus on women's rights and disability rights at University College Dublin. My previous research has focused on the 18th century and in particular representations of women in theater, fiction, and nonfiction, especially when it comes to nonfiction conduct manuals. I first discovered conduct manuals when I was a research fellow at Chawton House Library in England. I was working on my doctoral dissertation and I planned on doing a chapter on female education. I kept coming up with all of these conduct manuals, and conduct manuals cover topics that we don't really think of as educational. They were stuff on how to be chaste and how to be modest and how to be pious and how to be a good daughter and wife and mother and widow and old maid. And I couldn't help it. I just got sucked in. I thought it was fascinating. So I changed the topic of my chapter to conduct manuals. And at first, I was really amused. You know, all of the advice seemed really old-fashioned and outdated, and there was all of this information on how you shouldn't talk to men too much, and you shouldn't let anybody know how intelligent you are, and you shouldn't try to be funny. And then after a while, it all kind of started to sound familiar. I thought I was told pretty similar stuff when I was a teenager, reading magazines. So the whole idea of all of this advice from more than 200 years ago being still relevant today really fascinated me. And after I finished my dissertation and started working on my book and other articles focused on conduct manuals, I continually went to 18th century collections online to find primary texts and just really explore the wonderful variety of texts that they have, conduct manuals for men and women separately, for men and women jointly. I just had this seemingly infinite store of documents for my work right at my fingertips. One of the most exciting things about Echo is that you really never know what you're going to come across. So I pillaged Echo for my dissertation chapter on conduct books, and then after I graduated and was working as a professor, of course, I had to write articles and try to get published. And so I went back to Echo because I didn't really know what I wanted to write on, so I needed ideas. And I just kind of poked around and I found, like the big sort of standard 18th century conduct books that I was accustomed to running into when I did searches, but I also found really obscure stuff. So one of my first publications was on a pamphlet, and it was addressed to fallen women, which is kind of rare. Most conduct books are written for middle class young women who are, kind of aspiring to pass for a higher social level. But this one was written for women who had been seduced. And it was really interesting to read because the writer, who I believe was a man of God, goes into a lot of description about how the seduction might have happened, how the man might have wormed his way into the young woman's affections, but he also spends a lot of time on how she can be reclaimed and come back into salvation. And one of the interesting things about a pamphlet like this is it's really hard to imagine who actually purchased it, because if you were a servant girl who had been fired for having an affair with someone in the house, you probably didn't have a lot of money, you might not have been literate. So it's not really clear who would have purchased this, but it was really interesting to read, and I would not have found it if it hadn't been for Echo. I used the pamphlet on fallen women in an article I wrote for an essay collection called Exploring the Lives of Women, published by Pen and Sword Press. My interest in conduct manuals culminated in a book of my own called Conduct Books and the History of the Ideal Woman, was published in 2020 by Anthem Press and is also available as an audiobook from Blackstone Audio, which I'm very proud of because I believe that accessibility is quite important. The book examines 700 years of books telling women what to do. We go through medieval wife tests to 18th century analysis of companionate marriages to 19th century Victorian angels to 20th century suffragists and feminists right up to today and Me Too and #immodestwoman.